The auditorium was full. Hundreds of aliens from dozens of species sat in rows that curved upward like a giant bowl. The lights were dim except for the stage at the center where a tall figure stood alone. Her name was Vela. She belonged to the Dani, a species known across the galaxy for their intelligence and grace. She had lavender skin that seemed to glow softly under the lights. 4 slender arms moved as she spoke, gesturing at the holographic images floating beside her. She was young by Dani standards, but she had already made a name for herself as a scholar. Today was her greatest moment. She was presenting her thesis to the Galactic Academic Council. Ladies and gentlemen of the council, Vela said, her voice smooth and confident, I present to you my research on one of the galaxy's most amusing species, the humans of Earth. She waved one hand and a holographic image appeared. It showed a human male, dressed in ancient armor, holding a spear and shield. The word Spartan floated beneath it. The humans have a rich tradition of warrior mythology, Vela continued. They tell stories of great battles and heroic last stands. They speak of soldiers who fought until their last breath, of warriors who chose death over surrender. She changed the image. Now it showed a samurai, then a Viking, then a knight in shining armor. They have dozens of these warrior cultures in their history, each one filled with tales of impossible bravery and superhuman endurance. The audience murmured with interest. Most of them had heard of humans but knew little about them. Earth was a small planet on the edge of known space. Humans had only joined the galactic community 50 years ago. Vela smiled. But here is the truth that my research has uncovered. These stories are lies. End quote. She paused for effect. The audience leaned forward. Humans are one of the most fragile species in the galaxy. Their skin tears easily. Their bones break from simple falls. They cannot survive in cold or heat that most species consider comfortable. They need to drink water constantly or they die within days. A single puncture to many parts of their body can kill them in minutes. She showed medical diagrams of human anatomy, pointing out weakness after weakness. And yet, Vela said, laughing softly, they tell stories of warriors who fought for hours with arrows in their chests. They sing songs about soldiers who walked through fire. They teach their children that one human can defeat 100 enemies. The audience laughed with her. My conclusion is simple, Vela said. Human warrior mythology is a coping mechanism. They are a weak species that evolved on a dangerous planet to survive. They created stories that made them feel powerful. They invented heroes because they needed to believe they could overcome their many weaknesses. She stood straight and proud. The Spartans at Thermopylae exaggerated beyond recognition. The samurai code of honor, a fantasy created centuries after the fact. The Viking berserkers probably just men who drank too much fermented drinks. More laughter filled the auditorium. Humans are storytellers, not warriors. They are dreamers, not fighters, and their mythology, while entertaining, should not be taken seriously by any advanced civilization. Vela bowed as the audience applauded. The High Council awarded her top honors for her research. Scholars from 12 species congratulated her on her brilliant work. It was the proudest day of her life. After the ceremony, her mentor approached her. High Scholar Torm was old. His lavender skin faded to a pale purple. He had studied hundreds of species in his long life. Excellent presentation, Torm said. Very entertaining, thank you. Master, I have arranged a new assignment for you, he continued, a chance to observe humans directly. You will spend 6 months on a cargo vessel traveling through the Outer Rim. The ship has a mixed crew, including several humans. Vila frowned. A cargo ship, surely my talents could be better used elsewhere. Direct observation is important, Torm said. You have studied humans from a distance, now you will see them up close. It will add weight to your future publications. Vela did not want to go 6 months on a dirty cargo ship with primitive humans. Sounded terrible, but she respected her mentor, so she agreed. 2 weeks later, she boarded a vessel called the Wandering Star. It was not a beautiful ship. The metal walls were scratched and dented. The air smelled of engine oil and recycled oxygen. The crew was small, maybe 20 beings from various species. The captain was a large, four-armed creature named Borak. He welcomed Vela aboard and assigned her a small cabin near the cargo hold. We have 3 humans on the ship, Borak told her. The engineer, Emily Park, cargo handler named Tom, and our security officer, Jake Mitchell. Security officer, Vela asked. What does he protect you from? Borak shrugged 2 of his shoulders. Pirates, raiders. The Outer Rim can be dangerous. Vela almost laughed. A human protecting a ship from danger. The idea was absurd. She met Jake Mitchell that same day. He was waiting near her cabin, offering to help carry her bags. He was not what she expected. He was average height for a human, with brown hair cut short and a face that seemed permanently calm. His eyes were a soft gray color. He smiled politely and spoke in a quiet voice. Welcome aboard, he said. Let me know if you need anything. Vela studied him carefully. This was supposed to be Warrior, this soft, gentle creature who carried bags and smiled like a servant. Thank you, she said, unable to hide her disappointment. That night, Vela wrote in her research journal, first observation of human security officer. The subject is docile, timid, and eager to please, shows no signs of the warrior spirit described in human mythology. Further evidence that their entire warrior culture is pure fantasy. This assignment may be even easier than I thought. She closed her journal and went to sleep, certain that the next 6 months would only confirm everything she already believed. She had no idea how wrong she was. 3 months passed on the Wandering Star. Vela spent most of her time observing the humans on board. She watched them eat, work, sleep, and talk. She filled journal after journal with her notes, and everything she saw confirmed her thesis. Jake Mitchell was the most interesting subject. He was supposed to be the ship's protector, its guardian against the dangers of space. But Vela saw nothing dangerous about him. Every morning, Jake woke early and exercised in the cargo hold. He lifted weights and ran in place and did strain movements called push-ups. Vela watched from a distance and noted that while he seemed fit for a human, he was nothing special. Any creator could tear him apart in seconds. After exercise, Jake would shower and then make breakfast for whoever wanted it. He was a good cook. The crew liked his food. Vela found this amusing. The great human warrior making eggs and toast for his crew mates. During the day, Jake mostly sat in the security office watching monitors. Nothing ever happened. He read old books, Made of paper, a primitive habit that Vila found charming in a sad way. Sometimes he played card games with the crew. He always let others win. One evening, 2 crew members got into a fight. A reptilian trader named Sisk accused a small furry merchant named Dulo of cheating him in a deal. Voices were raised. Sisk pulled out a knife. Vila watched from across the room, curious to see how the human warrior would handle this. Jake walked over calmly. He did not raise his voice. He did not threaten anyone. He simply stood between the 2 angry beings and talked. "Hey," he said softly, "let us figure this out. Nobody needs to get hurt over a misunderstanding." His voice was gentle. His body was relaxed. He seemed almost bored. Within 5 minutes the fight was over. Sisk put away his knife. Dulo apologized. Jake suggested they share a drink and talk about the problem like adults. They agreed. Vila was disgusted. This was human conflict resolution. Talking compromise. Where was the legendary human aggression? Where was the berserker raid she had read about in their mythology? She approached Jake later that night. He was sitting alone in the observation deck looking out at the stars. "You handled that situation earlier," she said. Jake nodded. "It worked out. You did not fight, did not need to." Vila sat down across from him. "I have studied your species extensively. Your history is filled with war. Your stories glorify violence, and yet you seem to avoid conflict at every opportunity." Jake was quiet for a moment. "Fighting is a last resort, not a first choice, but your people celebrate warriors. You build statues to soldiers. You make movies about battles. We also build statues to teachers and doctors," Jake said. Vila waved her hand dismissively. "But the warrior myths are what define you. The Spartans who held the pass, the soldiers who stormed the beaches, the pilots who crashed into enemy ships. Those things happen," Jake said simply. "Impossible," Vila replied. "I have studied human biology. You are too fragile for such actions. Those stories are clearly exaggerated. Propaganda to inspire your young." Jake looked at her for a long moment. His gray eyes were calm, but something moved behind them, something old and tired. "Maybe you are right," he said finally. "Maybe they are just stories." Vila felt triumphant. Even this human admitted the truth. She wrote in her journal that night. "The subject shows signs of cultural shame. He seems embarrassed by his species' obvious lies. Perhaps some humans are beginning to recognize that their warrior mythology is fantasy. This is a positive development for their species." The next day, Emily Park found in the mesh hall. Emily was the ship's engineer, a small human woman with black hair and sharp eyes. Unlike Jake, she did not smile. "I heard about your research," Emily said. "The crew talks." "Yes," Vila said proudly. "I am documenting human behavior for the Galactic Archives. They say you think our warrior stories are lies." Vila nodded. "The evidence is clear. Humans are biologically incapable of the feats described in your mythology." Emily sat down across from her. Her hands were stained with engine grease. Her eyes were hard. "Let me tell you about my grandfather." Emily said he was a soldier in a war called Korea. His unit was surrounded by enemies. They were out of food, out of ammunition, dying from cold. They were ordered to retreat, but that would mean leaving behind wounded men who could not walk. Emily leaned forward. "My grandfather and 11 others volunteered to stay behind and hold the line so the wounded could escape. They fought for 16 hours. When rescue finally came, only 3 were still alive. My grandfather had been shot 4 times. He had killed 37 enemy soldiers. He walked out of those mountains carrying another man on his back. Vela smiled patiently. A touching family legend, but surely you understand that such stories grow larger. With each telling, Emily stared at her. I have seen the medal they gave him. I have read the official military records. I have seen the scars on his body before. He died. Records can be falsified. Scars can come from anywhere. Emily stood up. Her whole body was tense. For a moment, Vela thought the small human might actually attack her, but Emily just shook her head. You do not understand. Us, you never will, and I hope for your sake that you never have to. She walked away. Vela wrote in her journal, the female human became emotional when her cultural myths were questioned. This defensive reaction is common in primitive species. They cling to their legends because reality is too difficult to accept. She had no way of knowing that in less than 1 week she would witness the truth with her own eyes, and it would change everything she believed. The attack came on a Tuesday. Vela was in the cargo hold examining some trade goods for her research. The ship was quiet. Most of the crew was eating dinner in the mess hall. The engines hummed softly, a sound she had grown used to over the past months. Then the alarm started screaming. Red lights flashed across the ceiling. Captain's voice came over the speakers, but it was broken by static. Vela could only understand a few words. Boarding. Cree. All hands Cree. Vela knew that name. Every species in the galaxy knew that name. The Cree were monsters. They were insectoid creatures, 7 ft tall, covered in natural armor that could stop most weapons. Their arms ended in blade-like appendages that could cut through metal. They lived for raiding, killing, and taking whatever they wanted. Even the great military powers avoided fighting them directly. Vela heard the airlock opened somewhere in the ship. She heard screaming. She hid behind a stack of cargo crates, her forearms wrapped around herself in terror. Through a small gap between the crates, she could see the cargo hold entrance. Cree warrior walked in. It was the most terrifying thing Vela had ever seen. Its body was covered in dark brown armor plates. Its head was triangular with dozens of small black eyes that seemed to look everywhere at once. Its mouth was a mess of mandibles that clicked together as it moved. In the dim light, she could see something wet dripping from its bladed arms. Blood, the blood of her crewmates. The Cree scanned the cargo hold. For a terrible moment, Vela thought it had seen her, but it turned and walked back out, seeking more prey. Vela waited until her heart slowed down. The Dani had evolved past violence millions of years ago. They had no fight instinct, no survival rage. When danger came, they hid, they ran. They surrendered. It had worked for countless generations, but this was different. The Cree did not take prisoners. She had to move. Vela crept out of the cargo hold and into the main corridor. The screaming had stopped. That was somehow worse. The only sounds were distant crashes and the heavy footsteps of multiple Cree moving through the ship. She ran toward the engine room. Emily had shown her the route once. If she could get there, she could lock the door. The engine room had reinforced walls. She might survive long enough for Someone to rescue them, if there was anyone left to send a rescue signal. She turned a corner and slammed into something solid. It was Jake, but he was not the Jake she knew. The gentleman who made breakfast and played cards was gone. In his place stood something else. His face was calm, but it was a different kind of calm, cold, empty, focused. His gray eyes had changed. They looked at her, but they also looked through her, around her, past her. They were scanning for threats, calculating distances, planning movements. He held a metal pipe in one hand. In the other he held a knife. Both were already stained with something dark. Vela had studied human biology. She knew their muscles, their bones, their limitations. But she had never seen a human like this. His whole body was different. The way he stood, the way he breathed, the way he held his weapons, every part of him had become a weapon. Get to the engine room, Jake said. His voice was quiet, but it was not gentle anymore. It was the voice of someone who expected to be obeyed. Lock the door. Do not open it for anyone except me or Emily. There are 12 of them, Vela whispered. I counted the footsteps. 12 Kree warriors. I know they will kill you. One Kree can destroy 10 armed soldiers. 12 of them. She could not finish the sentence. Jake looked at her for just a moment. Something human flickered in his eyes, something sad, something tired, something that knew exactly what was coming. Maybe, he said. Why? Vela grabbed his arm with two of her hands. Why would you fight? You can hide. You can run. You can surrender. They have Emily, Jake said. They have the crew, my people. They are not worth your life. Jake smiled. It was not a happy smile. It was the smile of someone saying goodbye. That is where you are wrong, he said. That is where you have always been wrong about us. He gently removed her hands from his arm. Engine room. Now go. Then he turned and walked toward the sound of Kree footsteps. He did not run. He did not sneak. He walked like a man going to work. Like this was just another job. Like fighting 12 alien killing machines was something he did every Tuesday. Vela did not go to the engine room. She found an overhead maintenance duct and climbed inside. Metal tunnel was cramped, but she could move through it. She followed the path until she found a grate that looked down on the central corridor. She told herself it was for research. She told herself she needed to document what happened. The truth was simpler. She could not look away. She had spent years studying humanity. She had written papers about their mythology. She had laughed at their warrior legends. Now she was about to see if those legends were true. Through the grate, she watched Jake Mitchell walk alone into the darkness toward the monsters, toward his death, or so she thought. Vela watched through the metal grate as Jake entered the central corridor. 3 Kree warriors stood at the far end. They were huge, their armored bodies filling the hallway. Blood dripped from their blade arms. Behind them, Vela could see the bodies of crew members who had tried to run. The Kree saw Jake. They made a clicking sound with their mandibles. It took Vela a moment to realize they were laughing. One of them stepped forward. It raised its bladed arm and pointed at the small human standing alone before them. Jake did not speak. He did not threaten. He did not try to negotiate. He simply attacked. Vela had studied human movement. She knew how fast they could run, how high they could jump, how hard they could hit. She had memorized the numbers. The numbers were wrong. Jake moved like nothing she had ever seen. He was not faster than the Kree, he was not stronger, but he was something else. Something her research had never measured. He was precise, every movement had a purpose, every step took him exactly where he needed to be. When the first Kree swung its blade arm at his head, Jake was already moving. He ducked under the strike and drove his knife into the soft joint where the creature's arm met its body. The Surith screamed. It was a horrible sound, like metal scraping against glass. Jake did not stop. He pulled the knife free, spun around the wounded creature, and slammed his metal pipe into the back of its head. The armor cracked. The Kree fell. The other two attacked together. Their blade arms came from both sides, moving fast enough to cut through steel. Jake dropped to his knees and slid under the strikes. The Surith blades hit each other instead of him. Before they could recover, Jake was behind them. His Clear's throat knife found the gap in the second creature's neck armor. It fell, gurgling black blood. The third CH tried to run. Jake threw his pipe. It spun through the air and struck the creature's leg, shattering the joint. The Kree crashed to the floor. Jake walked over calmly, picked up a fallen blade arm from one of the dead creatures, and ended it. 3 Kree dead in less than 30 seconds. Veela could not breathe. Her 4 hands gripped the edges of the grate so hard that her knuckles turned white. This was impossible. This could not be happening. Her research, her thesis, her entire understanding of humanity was crumbling before her eyes. Jake picked up his weapons and moved deeper into the ship. Veela followed. Through the maintenance ducts, she crawled as fast as she could, desperate to keep watching. She had to see. She had to understand. Over the next 47 minutes, she watched Jake Mitchell hunt the Kree through the wandering star. He did not fight like an animal. He did not rage or scream or lose control. He fought like a machine, cold, efficient, relentless. He used the ship's corridors against the larger creatures, forcing them into tight spaces where their size became a weakness. He used shadows and surprise. He used every weapon he could find, and when those broke, he used pieces of the Kree themselves. But he was not perfect. He was not invincible. 4th Kree cut him across the ribs. Veela saw the blood, saw the pain flash across his face. Jake killed it anyway. The 7th Kree stabbed him in the thigh. Jake fell, then got back up. He limped now, but he did not slow down. The 9th Kree broke something in his left hand. Veela heard the crack. Jake switched his knife to his right hand and kept fighting. By the time he reached the 11th Kree, Jake was covered in blood, his own and theirs. His left arm hung uselessly at his side. His face was pale from blood loss. His movements were slower now, less precise. The Kree saw its advantage. It charged forward, blade arms raised for the killing blow. Jake did not dodge. He could not. His body was failing. Instead, he stepped into the attack. The Kret's blade went through his shoulder, pinning him to the wall behind. Any other species would have screamed, would have given up, would have died. Jake grabbed the creature's head with his good hand and began to hit it over and over. His forehead smashed into the Kree's face. Again. The Kree tried to pull back, but Jake held on. Blood poured down his face, mixing with the creature's own fluids. His body was dying, but his eyes were still alive, still fighting, still refusing to stop. Kree fell. Jake pulled the blade from his shoulder with a sound that made Veela sick. He swayed on his feet but did not Though 11 dead, one remaining in that. One had Emily. Jake followed the sounds. To the engine room, the door had been torn open. Inside, the largest Cree Vila had ever seen stood over Emily. Park, the small human woman, was bleeding. From a cut on her head, she was conscious but could not move. The Creer was playing with her, enjoying her fear. Jake appeared in the doorway. He could barely stand. His weapons were gone. He was bleeding from a dozen wounds. One arm was useless. His leg could barely hold his weight, but he was there. The Cree turned. Its mandibles clicked in what might have been surprise. This broken, dying creature had killed 11 of its warriors. Now it wanted to fight again. The Cree leader charged. The final battle lasted 4 minutes. It was the most brutal thing Vela had ever witnessed. No skill remained, no precision, just two creatures trying to destroy each other. With everything they had left, Jake used his body as a weapon, his teeth, his elbows, his skull, everything. When it was over, the CFT leader lay in pieces. Jake stood in the doorway, swaying like a tree in a storm. Emily was safe behind him. He had done what he promised. Then his legs gave out and he fell. Emily caught him before he hit the ground. From her hiding spot, Vela watched and understood nothing and everything at the same time. 3 days passed. The wandering star limped toward the nearest space station, its engines damaged but working. Emily had kept them running. Through pure stubbornness and skill, the remaining crew worked in silence. Still, shocked by what they had survived, 12 Cree warriors had boarded their ship. 12 Cree warriors had died. 1 human had killed them all. The story spread through the ship in whispers. The surviving crew members told each other what they had seen, what they had heard. Some of them had witnessed parts of the fight, others had only found the bodies. Afterward, all of them looked at the medical bay with something new in their eyes: fear, respect, wonder. Vila spent those 3 days in her cabin, staring at her research journals. Everything she had written seemed foolish now, childish, the observations of someone who had studied a picture and thought she understood the ocean. On the 3rd day, she finally found the courage to visit Jake. The medical bay was small and clean. Jake lay on a bed in the corner, covered in bandages. His left arm was in a cast. His shoulder was wrapped in thick white cloth. Tubes connected him to machines that beeped softly. He was awake. He was reading one of his old paper books, poetry. She noticed the same book he had been reading before. Vela stood in the doorway for a long time. She did not know what to say. How do you apologize to someone whose entire species you had insulted? How do you admit that everything you believed was wrong? You can come in, Jake said without looking up. His voice was rough but calm. I do not bite. Vila walked slowly to the chair beside his bed and sat down. Up close she could see how badly hurt he was. His face was bruised and cut. Dark circles hung under his eyes. He looked like someone who had died and come back because he had. The medical officer had told her that Jake's heart had stopped twice during the fight. His body had shut down from blood loss and trauma, but he had kept moving. Anyway, I was wrong, boss said. The words felt small, weak. Jake closed his book and looked at her. His gray eyes were the same as before, gentle, patient. Tired about what? Everything. Vila's voice cracked. The myths, the legends, the stories about human warriors, I said. They were exaggerations, lies, propaganda. she looked down at her. 4 hands, unable to meet his eyes. They were not exaggerations. They were understatements. Your people have been telling smaller versions of the truth because the real truth would terrify everyone who heard it. Jake was quiet for a moment. We do not tell those stories to scare people. Then why does your species celebrate violence? Why do you build monuments to killers? We do not celebrate violence, Jake said. Softly, we celebrate sacrifice. There is a difference. Vila looked up. I do not understand. Jake shifted in his bed, wincing at the pain. Those Spartans at Thermopylae, the ones you laughed at in your presentation, they did not fight because they wanted glory. They fought because if they did not, the enemy would reach their homes, their families, their children. He paused, catching his breath. Soldiers who stormed beaches and crashed planes into enemy ships. They were not crazy. They were not primitive. They did the math. They understood that their one life could save thousands of others, and they made a choice to die to protect. Vela thought about this. The Dani had evolved past violence. They solved problems with words, with diplomacy, with surrender. They had never understood why some species still fought. I watched you, she said quietly, through the whole fight. I saw you get stabbed. I saw you break. I saw your body failing, and you did not stop. You could not stop. How? How is that possible? Jake looked at the ceiling. I thought about Emily alone with that thing, scared, waiting for someone to help her, and I thought about what would happen if I stopped, if I gave up, if I lay down and let myself die. He turned back to Vela. That thought hurt more than any wound, more than any pain. The idea of giving up while someone I cared about needed me, that was the one thing I could not accept. But you are so fragile, Bella whispered. Your bodies break so easily. How can you push through such damage? Jake smiled. It was a sad smile, but it was real. Maybe that is why, because we are fragile, because we know how easily we can die. So when something matters enough, we decide that dying is acceptable, giving up is not. He reached over and touched her hand with his good arm. Your species stopped fighting a long time ago. You evolved past it. You found better ways to solve problems. That is not a weakness, that is a strength. But humans never stopped. No, we never forgot where we came from. The caves, the wolves in the darkness, the fire that might go out. We carry that fear with us always. And when someone we love is in danger, that fear turns into something else. What? Jake looked at her with those tired, gentle, terrifying eyes. Something that does not know how to quit. Vela sat in silence for a long time. Then she pulled out her research journal and opened it to a blank page. I am going to rewrite my thesis, she said. Do not corner a human. Jake laughed, then groaned at the pain it caused. That is a bit dramatic. Vela shook her head. Slowly, no, I do not think it is. She looked at the battered, bandaged, impossibly stubborn creature beside her. A species made of paper and glass and dreams, a species that should have died out long ago, a species that refused to accept that fate. The galaxy thought humans were weak. They were wrong. Humans were not the strongest. They were not the fastest. They were not the smartest, but they would not stop. And in the cold darkness between the stars, that was the most terrifying thing of all. Vela began to write.